confessional and unified and just excited about Jesus to the different kind of corners of New England. So that is a good question, and yes, we will certainly be doing this elsewhere. It's a great question. That's what we're going down for. Great. Any other questions? No? Good. All right. So again, Slack, talk to Scott or myself at the end if you're not on it yet, because that's where the information will be from now on. All of the information is coming on Slack, so don't wait for an email that's not coming. No, it's coming to Slack. Unless you cannot receive Slack, which that's fine, just let me know. Great. Are we live, Scott?
Yep.
Awesome. Okay, so advanced deliverance. Here we go. Back to our sessions. There's so much that can be said about deliverance ministry, and as you know, deliverance happens in all sorts of different ways for a believer. We are set free in all manner of ways. We're set free as we read the scriptures, as we apply them to our lives, as we put our minds, we choose to agree with truth, as we repent. Our function as prayer ministers is to assist people in reaching for Jesus. Demonic interference creates blind areas for all of us that seem like the wallpaper. There are some really obvious demonic issues. Sometimes it's voices and losing consciousness and addiction and things that are really pronounced and very obvious. But a lot of times there are demonic mindsets and lies that just sort of become the wallpaper of our world. And so it feels like, well, it's just my personality. I was delivered of something a few years back, and as soon as the lie, as soon as I was aware that it had been a lie, and I agreed with the Lord to step into freedom, to step into what He had for me instead, all of a sudden it became incredibly evident all around me, and I was like, oh, this is everywhere. This is happening all the time. I had no idea how much of this there was. But I didn't notice when it was the wallpaper. It just seemed normal. It seemed like the way things are. That happens a lot in regions. This is just a mindset. This is how we've learned how to survive in different places. It happens in families. This is just the way we do it in our family. And it can be a demonic stronghold. It can be something that goes back generations that's never even clearly articulated. It's just a way that we are, and the enemy loves to traffic in those areas. It can also kind of act as almost like a sleeper cell. I know this sounds really terrible, but you kind of go along happily in life until you hit an age or a situation that you never had to deal with before, and then suddenly you're experiencing demonic pushback or influence that it just never had a moment to show itself. Like you never had to deal with your parenting trauma until you had kids. You didn't realize how codependent you were until you got married. You never had the opportunity necessarily to act out of those certain kinds of demonic mindsets until the opportunity arose. Does that make sense? There can also be things that rise up situationally in our lives that can become strongholds that weren't necessarily before. So we're dealing with a large spectrum of ministry in deliverance ministry, and I think one of the really sweet things that the Lord has done up here is to remove deliverance ministry from the smoke and lights show to a part of our Christian walk. Like this, we are going from glory to glory. We are being set free from the old. He is our deliverer. We are walking into a sweeter place all the time. Like we are walking out into better places. It's no longer the preserve of those really screwed up people that have some demons. In Healing Prayer Ministry, we talk about a spectrum. I'm reviewing some information for some of you. Some of you are like, I don't remember any of this. That's okay. Some of this is review for those of you who are prayer ministry junkies and you've been to healing prayer class like 12 times. But we talk about a sort of a spectrum of demonic influence. If you imagine that down here on the lower end is, you went into a creepy house and you felt kind of yucky for the rest of the day. Or you had an interaction with somebody that didn't necessarily trigger something in you dramatic, but man, we call it getting yucked. They just kind of let you have it. and you feel really gross, and maybe you're even tempted to believe what they've said. Maybe it had some real weight behind it, and that voice sort of echoes for you for a couple of days. A lot of times that has some spiritual weight to it. Sometimes there's demonic influence in those places, and we pray cleansing prayers over those things, and we would call that low-level demonic interference that, if undealt with, can become a problem. And you can end up with issues if you don't deal with those things on a regular basis. We call it taking out the garbage before it starts to smell. But so along that spectrum, imagine that you move from that into the habits and hang-ups and the things that are more pronounced, kind of stuff that is a little more visible and regular and actually a part of either generational life or choices that you've made in your life that have opened you up to demonic interference, demonic strongholds. And then all the way down at the end, which is something that we just generally don't see in the church, is full-blown possession. And there's a level, if you could picture along that line the amount of volition that's available to somebody, kind of decreases the further they move along that line. So the level of demonic influence, the strength of the stronghold kind of increases as that progression increases, to a point where it's really difficult for somebody who has a generational issue and has been involved in the occult in these different ways to partner with. By no means impossible. Jesus is our deliverer, but there's a larger amount of their volition that has been compromised by that. You've prayed with people that have a difficult time getting words out. You see a larger level of their volition being impacted. It becomes really hard to agree with truth the further down the spectrum you go. Does that make sense? I mean, down here, you walk into a yucky house, you say, I walked into a yucky house. You say, get out of here in Jesus' name, Lord, cleanse me from any stuff in the air. And you walk away. Down here is, this is in the family system. It's also reinforced with demonic and occult ties. It's just so well integrated. And it's easy. What I want to talk about especially today, I want to talk about a little more at the end of the session, is the interplay between what we in the West imagine are very different realms, so the realm of the spirit, the realm of the emotions, and the realm of the physical. And in the West, we love to draw hard, solid lines between those worlds. But even science now is allowing for a more porous idea, at least between the emotional and the physical, if not the spiritual, the emotional, and the physical. And what we're finding in healing prayer ministry is, and that line is awfully blurry if it's there. It's awfully blurry. Stuff in Sam's like, can I get a witness? It's awfully blurry if it's there. Stuff just impacts straight across the board. You can get demonic stuff influences physical stuff leads to demonic stuff, emotional stuff can have interplay in both areas, and so what we're growing up in is being holistic ministers. It's being people who treat things not only from a spiritual realm. You got a demonic issue, you say, well, that person's been delivered, but that demonic issue has also caused physical problems. It's not wrong to then also address those physical things by physical means. We'll talk a little bit more of that in a little while. Okay, so the further along on the spectrum somebody is when they have friends. That's the polite way of saying it. We say God will never deliver you of a friend. So the more friends someone has, and the closer friends they are, fair, okay? Read demon, that's just trying to be polite here. Not that it's important to be polite to demons, but we're in the business of restoring human dignity. So we're not trying to make people feel yucky because they are influenced by demonic ideas or demons. Because we all kind of walk in the human world. Okay, so the first thing that I wanted to address today is the fact that the demonic stuff that's not presenting as demonic stuff tends to make people difficult to deal with. That doesn't mean that everyone who is irritating has demons, okay? It doesn't mean that every personality you don't like you can write off and say, it's just demonic. That person's got a demonic personality and I hate them. So it's okay because it's just their demons. But just being aware of personal reactions to the person you're interacting with. The other day I was in the church, I was working on some sessions, and a woman walked in off the street. She was probably 20, and I was just very visibly afflicted. I mean, I think she was hearing voices, she was very confused, and kind of interacting with me in a really bizarre way. And we live in downtown, so that kind of thing happens. And one of the other gentlemen who worked here came to get me, I think because I was a woman. He was like, oh, maybe you should be the one that fields this conversation. So she walks through the building, and she needs to go into every room. She thinks there's a meeting here for her. And I said, we don't have any meetings right now. We are in church, but there are no meetings going on right now. She said, no, there's a meeting here, and I'm here for the meeting. I'm like, no, there's no meeting going on right now, but my team's going to be here in a little while. If we could pray for you, we'd love to. If there's anything that we could do for you, we'd be happy to sit down and talk and have a conversation. She turned around and she looked at me, and it was a creepy moment. Sometimes, if you've been doing it for a long time, sometimes when someone has kind of demonic stuff, I see, and not always, but frequently we'll see, it looks like almost cellophane over their eyes. Some of you are nodding, you're familiar with that. It looks almost like there's kind of a glaze or a layer. Some of you can see that. Some of you have seen it in the past. And there was a glaze, and she looked at me, she said, don't follow me. Just like that, like creepy as can be. And my flesh was terrified. I was like, oh! It's like a scary movie. She's gone around poking in each room in the church, and she's hunting for something, and then she veers around 180 and does her cellophane look, and she says, don't look at me. And my flesh wanted to respond to the creepiness of the situation, and also she was being rude. So I had a kind of a double flesh reaction, like this, you're in someone else's church, you're trespassing, you may or may not be crazy, but I'm happy to call the police if this is going to be a problem, and that was really creepy, so I'm also a little unnerved. And I took that moment in my heart to step back and remember that the person in front of me is a person, which is really challenging sometimes when someone is acting under the influence. When somebody's acting under the influence, what those demons are trying to get you to do is respond to them in a way that will reinforce their stronghold. What a demon in a ministry setting is trying to do is get you to reinforce their stronghold. Does that make sense? So this person, pretend example, has hopelessness. They're suicidal. They've dealt with this suicidal ideation. They're also receiving therapy help. We love team approaches here. I should send them to Diane. So anyway, have you ever noticed when you're ministering to somebody, the air kind of changes and suddenly it's hard to disagree with them? Their case is really strong for the way things are hopeless. They've had an ongoing situation that's really hard, and you offer them a few solutions and none of them are going to work. And the more they talk, the more they have kind of airspace, they're filling up the airspace, the more you start to kind of feel the feelings. Like, oh yeah. And the more God kind of seems to pretend in the situation, or the more you feel a little resentful, like, oh yeah, God's really not going to show up for them. All this prayer ministry stuff, this is just, this is nice for people that aren't this messed up, but this is the real deal. God's not big enough for this. I don't know if some of you are nodding, some of you have noticed that in ministry situations. I remember one time I was praying for somebody who had a tantrum spirit, and which is just special. And we were doing pastoral counseling, so this was not, on the front, on the onset, going to be a deliverance prayer ministry session. And the person started to respond to me, and as we got to the heart of what was going on, I started kind of touching the wounded place in the questions. They started getting really snippy at me, really accusatory. And I had this sudden impulse to slap them. And I would never slap somebody, but I want to create, this is what happens when we're ministering to people. It's easy to get, to bite, to get hooked on the demonic influence that's kind of floating through the air while you're talking to somebody. And to forget you're dealing with a person, And that person, Jesus has made a way for their freedom, period. And the demonic stuff is a distraction. It's a side game. It's demonic enemies are just trying to put you off the scent of a person who is so valuable to the King of Kings that he has postured, he has died. He's given his very life for the person in front of you, and he really likes them. He really loves the person in front of us. And what the demonic wants to make us do in that situation is hate that person in front of us, is to be afraid of them or angry with them. And so that person will, if they're acting under the influence of that stronghold, will act out of it. They'll say things that are in line with the demonic stronghold. They will say things that are in line with victimization. Sometimes they'll start to say things that are just really childish. You're like, man, I thought we were all adults here, and now you're behaving like a serious child. You have this sudden desire to interact with that person like they're a child. That thing that just sort of switches. And I'm sort of painting a picture for you because I found that that's a real growth area for a lot of us in prayer ministry. Sometimes it's very overt. You deal with a spirit of death and someone starts to fall asleep on your prayer team and you're like, oh. That happens. Sometimes if someone's really afflicted with death, you start getting sleepy. You notice you start yawning a lot. That's kind of, some of you are nodding. I remember Dolly once actually fell asleep. We were praying for a woman who had had attempted suicide multiple times, and Dolly actually fell asleep. She doesn't mind me to tell that story. I've told her a million times. I mean, I've gotten close myself a couple of times. But you start yawning. Someone who is afflicted with a demonic can have very distracting, and not always distracting like twitching or something that's overtly demonic, but something that is provocative. It's trying to provoke you to lose your cool, or to get off your game, or to agree with the demonic stronghold. Okay, does this make sense? Yeah, that's what happens a lot of times. It's actually sometimes a signal. There's something more going on in this conversation than just this person's wrestling through something. Sometimes it's a signal. You're under the influence. We can find kind ways of approaching that. You don't have to be like, you have a demon. Excuse me, you have a demon. I had someone say that to me once. I was prayer ministering to somebody. It's been helpful in this circumstance to use the person's name, to humanize the situation and use their name. Whether or not they're demonically manifesting in the sense like their eyes are dilating funny, or they're having some demonic physical manifestation. If you're sensing the emotional atmosphere change, or you're finding a strong impulse, there's a possibility that you're just being triggered and it is your stuff. And you can remain present to that and say, okay, Lord, I'm going to talk to you about this later. This is triggering something in me. I'm going to hand that to Jesus and allow that to belong to him. And if I can, continue to be present to this person. So if it is triggering an old thing in you, it is okay to take a step back if it's actually your stuff. But the reality is the enemy wants you to think all your old stuff's always your stuff. So you also have permission to say, all right, Jesus, I'm willing to have a conversation with you, but this moment's about this person. This actually isn't about me. And I'm going to bless them because I'm here by the authority of Jesus to do kingdom work. Does that make sense? It's really easy to get derailed in those kind of, especially when it resonates with something old of yours that used to be yours. Really confusing. It's really helpful to use the person's name. Keep the river flowing outwards. Cinnamon, I noticed that you seem upset. Can you talk to me about what you're feeling right now? And that, instead of continuing to kind of root around in their past, they can talk about the emotions themselves. When did you start feeling upset when we were talking? Uh-oh. Now that thing is like getting out in the open. Okay, if you find that you're getting distracted by strong emotions, smells, some of you have, and some of us grow up into this area, but sometimes there's a strong smell that happens in an environment where someone is influenced by demonic stuff. I actually experience like angelic smells sometimes when I'm ministering to people as well, and it's just really encouraging to me if I'm praying for somebody and I smell frankincense. I'm like, yes, they're on my side. I'm like, there's help. It's gonna be good. Some of you smell smells. Some of you get sensations. You suddenly feel anxiety in your gut. Your heart starts to race. You start to sweat. Don't get distracted by the manifestations. It's okay in that moment, so here's another tool, to ask for a moment of prayerful silence. This doesn't have to be I'm losing control, can we have silence? This can be, do you mind if we take a moment and let's just wait on the Lord together for a minute? And that person may not be able to wait on the Lord, but you may need a minute to center on Jesus, to hear his voice, to be reminded that he loves you. Because you're human. You're a human ministering to humans. You're a human with feelings, with a past, with a future, with kids, with a family, with parents, with a spouse, with whoever you have in your life that's on the table, that you feel threatened, that you're remembering all these things. So it's okay. What I'm trying to say here is it's okay to be a human that's ministering to other humans. And it's okay to be present to the fact that you're a human. And then also to take a step back and remember, okay, I'm here, I'm on mission, and Jesus is for me. The Father's got this. And it's okay to just take a step back. You don't have to come up with an answer. But I want to give you my favorite tool, which is silence. It's okay to be silent for a moment. It's helpful to tell someone you're going to be silent for a moment. Often, the presence of strong emotions, anger, defensiveness, irritation, panic, fear, sexuality, victimization, redirection, is a manifestation of the stronghold itself, not simply your own reaction to the person in front of you. Sometimes it's your reaction, especially in early days. But most of the time, a lot of the time, it's actually a reaction to the stronghold. Actually a reaction to something that's manifesting so that you'll reinforce it. Does that make sense? Like this person's got a real rejection thing going, and they've got a demonic stronghold of rejection. That demon is going to try to do whatever it takes to get you to reject them. So if it can stir the emotional environment in a way that makes you irritated and hate that person in front of you, it's going to make the ministry session a lot less productive. Some of you are sitting there thinking, I have a friend, I've done this to people in the middle of ministry sessions. That's great. You can go to manifestation. The number one time that it's really a good idea to bring in, and CHM practices this as well, they have kind of this is when we bring in the ordained folks, and they keep them around, and they're accountable to a different set of people, and the Lord does bestow certain graces in the church in different ways. Heavy occult involvement. If somebody has attained particularly a certain level of leadership in the occult, it's a good idea to counter that with leadership within the church. That doesn't mean you can't minister or pray with somebody, but that is oftentimes a